All right, everybody, welcome to a special edition of Mondays Down South here. Just Cy and I, as mentioned, I think maybe on last week's NFL podcast or maybe 2 weeks ago, we're trying to do more baseball this season after a great season for the Mets. Disappointing series for the Orioles, but still a fun time to be an Orioles fan. So definitely trying to do more baseball this year. So we're going to kick that effort off with a free agency prediction special here today. And then as we go through the season, once NFL winds down, we'll try to stick on the same weekly cadence for you and just pivot over to more baseball talk. So I'll pass it over to my guy Cy here for a busy week of podcasting, but excited to talk free agency as the winter meetings approach here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I'm actually waking up from a nap not too long ago, and I had a long wedding weekend. Shout out to Sid Ramala and Nina Gupta for getting married this weekend. I'm gonna have to let them know they got a shout out today on the pod. I am so excited about this. Evan and I brought this up a few weeks ago as we generally yap a lot about baseball, but I feel like our baseball friend group tends to be more specific in particular. And as the offseason has progressed, especially as a Mets fan who, coming off what Evan alluded to, and Evan being an Orioles fan with both teams making the playoffs, there's a lot of moves to be made this offseason and a lot of cap space, at least on our front. So I've been every single day, like, I go to bed reading about MLB trade rumors, and I wake up and it's one of the first things that I'm reading about in terms of free agency. So I am very excited about this, and I also am just really excited to talk about baseball more in general. It's a fun time, and we really hope that people tune in. And we're going to try to be a little bit creative with it too, so we're not just giving you still content. The idea here is to try to come up with some spice as we go along. So yeah, that's all I got to say. I kind of want to just jump in because we have quite a few guys to get through, and I think we're gonna have some pretty fun, like, wild out there predictions. So I'm here for it.
Yeah, it should be a good time. And yeah, the MLB offseason's funny because it's such a slow drip that you're it's like a 3-month process of, like you said, refreshing trade rumors and Twitter and whatnot. And then you are just randomly hoping that today's the day you get some big breaking news for your team. But yeah, I guess we'll jump into it. I think we're going to go kind of backwards to forwards with the top, I think 12 to 15. We kind of mixed and matched a little bit here based on the MLB trade rumors list. Talk a little trades, and then if there's any honorable mentions you want to mention, go for it as well. But I guess we'll start off with the most unique free agent of this offseason, but nonetheless one of the biggest names in Roki Sasaki, the 23-year-old pitcher coming over from Japan, international league or international free agent. So he can only get a $2 million bonus based on the international bonus pool rules. But he can sign with any team. So it's kind of a unique situation, but there's an obvious favorite here, but I'll pop it over to you to see if you're going chalk with Sasaki, or if you have something else in mind.
I will say it was probably important for me to preface this too, but with MLB free agency in general, I find it to be the hardest to predict because while the big market teams are going after the big fish, there's always that element of the teams in between the lines maybe making offers that are great. So, for example, Kikuchi is an example of that. We can talk about him maybe after Sasaki. But one thing I'll say about Sasaki is he's maybe the most unique free agent situation we will have ever seen after Ohtani, right? For him to leave the Japanese league 2 years earlier than he would have been eligible for, I'm sure a $300 million contract, something similar to what Yamamoto signed. I'm just guessing is probably what he would have gotten. Clearly, he wants to be here for the sake of just showing up and making a name in the MLB, which is why, even though all signs point to the Dodgers, people were throwing these rumors out that maybe he'd want to go to a team that has a smaller market with a really good pitching development. And I don't buy that at all because I'm you're not leaving Japan 2 years early to come here and be in a small market, especially if you're not getting a big signing bonus. So until he's not a Dodger, I can't predict him to go somewhere else because I just truly believe that to beat out the Dodgers would be really difficult. The one thing I will throw out there, though, Evan, regardless of what prediction we both go with, I've actually been hearing that there's a world where if Roki says I want the full signing bonus, teams can just essentially renege their international signing contracts that they've already like had hand like word of mouth deals with, and could technically just let those go and just give Sasaki like the full international signing bonus or close to the full signing bonus. I've heard a decent bit about this. And what's interesting about that, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, I think it's actually a really bad look if a team was to do that because all these guys that they said that they were going to sign now are out on the market. And let's say, for example, the Mets, Sasaki wanted to come to the Mets. I know my system more, so I'm going to use this as an example. If we were to do that, that means that the number two international prospect in baseball is currently signing with us. If we were to let him go, what if the Orioles are like, hey, we have the number five guy, but I'd rather have the number two guy, and then the next team goes, "Oh, we want the five guy." It creates chaos. So we haven't seen this. There's so many unique situations that come up, but I'm just gonna throw that out to you and like kind of see what you think about that. Because more than where he's going, I'm more curious about like how it impacts the world outside the U.S. more.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't heard that. That's a dicey situation when you're starting to back out of verbal contracts there. I think it's definitely very interesting because obviously, like you said, it's the most known commodity to come out of the international market. I think maybe ever. I don't have any historical basis on that. I'm just guessing, but I assume it is. But you can get obviously some huge contract or some huge prospects for little no cost. I mean, just like from a for the Orioles, like Samuel Basallo, who's one of the top 10 prospects in the game right now, was this like international prospect they signed for, hardly anything on the grand scheme of things. And now, he's 1 year away from being a, impact power bat in the middle of your lineup. And then, so are you willing to devote, Sasaki's going to command the entire thing, like you said. The Dodgers have the ability to give him the max. They have the most. The Orioles are in the top three. But, do the Dodgers think it's worth it to give it all to one guy when you can get a slew of prospects or, I don't know. And that's one of the reasons I think maybe the Dodgers maybe don't go this route because of like, a team that like that with the player development and the scouting that they have, like they might think that they can do a whole lot more with that 2 point whatever million dollars than just giving it to one player. So it is very interesting. The Dodgers seem like the obvious choice. And then it's the reason I think he's coming over early is obviously the endorsements, right?
Yeah, of
He
course.
thinks that 2 years of endorsements in the US can make up for the millions of dollars he's going to lose by waiting the 2 years. And then it's the factor of if he goes to the Dodgers, they're already just, funneling everything into Ohtani. So can he get enough
Exactly.
endorsement wise in that market? But it's also so much bigger of a market than some of these other places. So there's so much in play. Would be interesting to be his agent. And then also obviously the personal and baseball side of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see what he decides. But
Do you have a
yeah.
prediction?
So I'm gonna try and go no duplicates with you in the cases where I go after you. So I think San Diego has a really, really good shot at him. Yu Darvish is a mentor of his from the World Baseball Classic. Again, like kind of smaller market, but a pretty big name team at this point. They're one of the best teams in the league, so you'd be able to win right away. They have openings in their rotation. And then it sets up, he wouldn't be teammates with Ohtani and Yamamoto, but it sets up a great rivalry of those two Japanese pitchers and Sasaki and Darvish. I think that would be a really, really compelling spot for him. He's probably going to the Dodgers, but I think the Padres have a legitimate shot here.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Dan. We're not going to take this much time with every free agent, but this is such a unique one that I'm kind of down to spend a little bit more time on him. The one thing that I will say also is like, if he's not going to take, let's say he gets to even the 5 million, whatever it is, like that's way below what his market value would be if he was able to sign a regular free agent contract, right? So that's why I truly believe that he's going to LA, San Diego, or one of the New York teams. That's that, and I only say that because, and definitively with LA having the highest chance and San Diego probably being second. And the reason I say that is you think of endorsements. If you're gonna come here and make most of your money based off of endorsements, especially with the population, like the Japanese population that you see in the West Coast where those two teams are, and in New York City, where obviously like you've seen guys go to the Yankees and Mets throughout the course of history that have made you know strides and made money over there. You go there because that's where you get like the number of Asian endorsements and stuff that like with the popular crowds and stuff in the area, right? So it would be really shocking to me if that didn't happen because he can make more money off those endorsements than he could off an MLB contract.
Yeah.
And the other note that I'll make is if you're the Padres, if you're the Mets, the Yankees, your pitch is going to be, hey, you can go to the Dodgers, but you'll always be the third you know, third most important Japanese player on that team. If you come to us, you could be our ace. Like that's the pitch they're going to make. Whether it's going to work or not, I don't know. I hope it does because I don't want the Dodgers to continue to just get all the best Japanese players. But hey, we got you just mentioned you Darvish. We got Kodai Senga, and the Yankees are going to say, hey, we don't have any of them, and remember Masahiro Tanaka and all those guys. Come be one of them. So it'll be fun. It'll be really fun to see what happens.
Yeah, I also think the Dodgers. I'm hearing rumblings that some scouts like maybe don't think Sasaki's as good as people think, and that he's like more of like a good like middle rotation starter as opposed to like a bona fide ace. So I
Yeah.
wonder if the Dodgers maybe with that in mind, if they agree with that assessment, are just like, man, we'll just sign him if he becomes an ace, we'll just sign him in 4 years or 6
No,
years or whatever it is, and give him the
you're
big
probably
bucks. So,
right, and you alluded to it earlier too, because a team like the Dodgers is going to be the kind of team who has really good international scouting, right? So
no.
what if you were the team that let go of an Acuna or an Alvarez because you got greedy with a pitcher right here right now? I don't know. You don't want to be that team, but anyway, we probably should keep moving on. But yeah.
Yeah, good job. I guess a couple moves have already happened. I think you touched on earlier. So you say Kikuchi signs with the Angels. He would kind of be in this 12 to 15 range. What are your thoughts on this move? The Angels have been really active in this market already, in a very funny way.
Get Artie Moreno. This guy is like, I don't know if he's just like, no offense, he might just be senile. Like what? Like I don't know why he thinks he should be signing like free agents of value right now because they're not competing, man. Like they don't have a foundation to build upon at the moment. I think hopefully, what the funny thing I thought about the Kikuchi situation was it's a pretty good contract. I actually think that like the Angels got a really good deal personally, given what Kikuchi did in the second half of last year, assuming you have a good pitching development situation, which they do not, right? So if you're an Angels fan, your hope essentially has to be right now that he's so good the first half of the year that you just trade him in the first half on this 3-year, $20 million contract, and some good team will take that happily. But I don't know what the Angels are doing. Like I actually think it's a great value contract if like let's say the Mets or the Dodgers, the Yankees or the Orioles or someone who's good at like developing pitching did it, then I think it would be a great contract for them because he's someone that legitimately could be a top 2 or 3 starter when he's at his best. He was for Houston. I'm kind of annoyed though because I'm like, if I knew he was going for 3 years, $60 million, I'm sure David Stearns would say the same thing. I would want him on my team. I think he's got the chops to do it. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, I spot on agree with you. This is just classic Angels. They sign not one of the top free agents, but one of a good but like more middle of pack free agent just out of nowhere, like right at the beginning of the offseason, maybe overpay him a little bit. And I agree. Like Houston tweaked so much with what he was doing, which made him successful. I do not trust the Angels to be able to continue to do that. So I think you're going to see more of like what he was his entire career in Toronto, like a 3-4 starter that's pretty inconsistent, really good stuff. But so I think ultimately that's not going to be a great contract for them, but it could be for another team, like you said. So classic Angels. They got Soler, they got Darno, they got Kevin Newman. They've been busy, man, but they're going to be no better. So.
I mean, by the end of this year, I'd be shocked or at least by the end of the next years, I'd be shocked if most of those guys are still there.
Yeah, and then the other move, Brady's an interesting trade here. Brady Singer goes to Cincinnati for Jonathan India, one that's been rumored a while. Joey Weimer in the deal as well to Kansas City, who I like a little bit. So, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's a good deal both sides. I mean, clearly they both address the need. I actually think like in the short term, it's a good deal for Kansas City because they saw that they could compete, and so they're clearly trying to capitalize on that. In India's great clubhouse leader, he's shown up in big moments. But I actually think the Reds getting Brady Singer, while a year or two into his professional career, I think that he hasn't achieved a ceiling yet, and maybe a change of scenery with the different kind of pitching development. He had a good season last year. I think he has a potential to be even better than that. Maybe Kansas City didn't feel that way, but I think this is a great trade for them personally, the Reds.
Yeah, the Royals side first, I guess. Like, what's the plan? Because Michael Massey's locked in as their, every day or at least against righties second baseman. I love Michael Massey. I think he's a stud. So he's not going anywhere. I guess so then they do have an opening at third base. Michael Garcia hasn't really developed how they'd like. So they had him as more of a bench bat in the playoffs. I mean, they do have DH at bats open for India, who I know is, the Reds have been trying to DH him forever. So I'm a little curious how the defense fits on. I'm sure it'll, play itself out, gives him another good bat to maybe potentially lead off in front of Bobby Witt.
Do you think Massey would, given his propensity to play second, do you think he would be someone that they could move over and just put India at second if they need DH at bat somewhere else, maybe?
to third.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assume one of them will just play third. I don't have I feel like Massey's just a second baseman, but I don't have a ton of yeah, I don't know what his skill set looks like defensively as much, but I assume they just have one play third. Michael Garcia off the bench, mix in a DH here and there. I mean, I'm sure it works itself out, so I think it's a good pickup. But they do have to replace that number 4 starter spot for me. Like I assume the plan is obviously they trade Singer, who's their number 4, find a really good top 3. I assume they'll just dip into like the middle back end tier of the free agent market to replace that. Is the plan, and then it looks like they have Kyle Wright coming off injury, which could be interesting. Coming over from Atlanta a couple years ago, and then Alec Marsh is like a good, like, swingman kind of number 6. So, and I like to pick up for the Reds. Good pitching.
I didn't even talk about Colin Wright. That's a really good point. He was pretty solid when he was healthy. So.
Yeah. But I guess we'll jump back into the list. I think next one you mentioned, Tyler O'Neill. Injury plagued, but when healthy, he's been really good. Was a great fit in Boston there with the Green Monster. So I'll let you start this one off with Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah, so I think there's a team that's been taking shots at free agents like year in and year out, and unfortunately, I think a lot of times they don't get the love they deserve, maybe, or don't get the love from free agents that they would want because they're in a different country. And I think the Toronto Blue Jays are going to swing at guys like Soto and swing at guys like some of these higher free agents with with more power, and I don't think they're going to get it. And then I think they're going to pay Tyler O'Neill a little bit more than everybody else to make sure that they add some more power to that lineup and hopefully try to compete for them at least one more year before they have to make a decision on extending that of Vladdy and letting one of the two go, Bo Bichette or Vlad Guerrero. And I anticipate that it'll be Bo Bichette that's going somewhere else. So I think it's going to be Tyler O'Neill to the Blue Jays this year. That's my prediction.
I like it. I do have the Blue Jays getting a bat on this list, but it's not this one. So I love that you recommended this one as one of your honorable mentions, because I think it was just today I was scrolling Twitter, becoming obsessed with adding Tyler O'Neill to the Orioles. So I'm going to predict him going to the Orioles. The Orioles need to replace Anthony Santander. I don't have him coming back, unfortunately. And they kind of need to pivot that role into someone that hits lefties better than righties. Santander, switch hitter, but a little bit better against right-handed pitching. They really need someone in the middle of the lineup that can mash against lefties and play the outfield. And maybe isn't necessarily an everyday starter, more of like a high-end platoon, like mixes in against righties as well, with Heston Kjerstad projecting in right field, barring a trade. So it might be a little high-end for that role, because I'm sure O'Neill wants to be an everyday player. But with his injury history, it's also hard to trust. So, but I think it would be a great add as essentially an everyday player that kind of just bounces around multiple positions, and you try to get most of his at-bats against lefties. But I think that would be a huge pickup, him or like a Randall Grichuk on the lower end. Or, we want Teoscar Hernandez, but that's not going to happen. I just don't think that's realistic from coming to Baltimore. So that's my fallback plan. And I guess on that vein, like Profar is kind of in the same. He's maybe a little even better than O'Neill. I just have him going back to San Diego, but I don't know if you have another view on Profar.
San Diego. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I think a lot of teams will be interested, and I do think there's going to be a pretty good market for him, especially after some of these bigger bats have signed. But I think what San Diego did in turning him into this, like, not that it was all them, but for him to turn into the all-star caliber player that he turned into with them, and being able to live in San Diego and be successful and have a very successful season, why would he leave? Like, assuming they pay him even close to what he deserves, I feel like he's going to want to stay there, right? Like, it's a perfect situation.
Yeah, it felt like a perfect fit in that lineup too, to mix in with the righties they got, Machado, Bogarts, Tatis, like the switch hitter in there. All right, next one, kind of an honorable mention here, but a really interesting free agent, Walker Buehler. Obviously had an incredible World Series run, down year, injuries, fastball velocity down, but then he seemed to figure it out in the World Series. I am going to send him. This was rumored the other day as a team that's interested. I'm going to send him to the New York Yankees. I'll mention kind of the Yankees plan a little bit more later on, as to give a better whole picture. But I don't think they're going to get one of the top elite starters, but I do think they want to add one. And maybe continue to look to trade Cortez, or maybe he's more of a 6 swingman with the bullpen, and then Marcus Stroman, kind of the same idea, just to give him a really strong top 6. So I think he's an interesting fit there. I would think he maybe goes to another big market coming from LA. And maybe this is a shorter term, prove it 1 or 2 year deal, just to prove that he's all the way back. But so I think that's a good fit there with the Yankees.
Yeah, I also have him going to New York, except I have him going to the New York Mets. I think that, I mean, this might also be me being hopeful, but I think that especially after Stearns came over last year and we did what we did with Luis Severino and with Sean Manaea, with the whole pitching development, I think it'd be a good pitch for Bueller to say, hey, look at what we just did. We value you. You also kicked our butts in the NLCS, so we clearly recognize your value. And I also think in terms of AAV, if he was going to get like a 1-year deal to reset his market, which I expect, he'll probably get one of those like 2-year deals where it's a player opt out after, I'm guessing, so that he can try to go capture a big contract while he's still somewhat young. I think we'd probably offer the most money, assuming we want him. So I think that's why I think he comes to Mets, and I think he'd slot in perfectly because we obviously need a lot of rotation upgrades. He's like your perfect like 1-year deal kind of guy.
Yeah, I like it. I will acknowledge as well. My list has a lot of hopefulness for my own team on it as well. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially like what they did last year with Manaea and Severino. It's a very similar situation, so definitely makes sense. The next one, this is for me maybe the most underrated player in baseball, Christian Walker, coming off several great seasons to Arizona, a late blooming prospect that the Orioles got rid of. But he's a little bit on the older side. He's older than Pete. I think he's a better player than Pete Alonso, but he is older. Elite defender. He's probably the best defensive first baseman in baseball. Less homers, but more of just an all-around like RBI producer in the middle of your lineup. So I'll pop to you first on this one for Christian Walker.
Yeah, so I was kind of a little bit torn. I think Houston would be a perfect fit for him because I think that, especially with Jose Abreu not being ideal situation, they love a good defensive first baseman. He adds power to that lineup. I don't know if they keep Bregman. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. We talk about that later in this pod. But I'm gonna have him going to the Yankees because I think he's like kind of the perfect fit there with Rizzo, not there anymore, and he clearly would add not that first base defense is as important as other positions, but we saw how bad their defense was last year, and he helps that right side so much more. And then he gives you pop in a lineup where there's a lot of injuries. He's a consistent hitter. He goes out there, he provides pop and provides support to guys like Aaron Judge. The only issue with that signing is he's old again, but at least like you give him a 2 to 3 year contract for a lot of money, and he provides in that time, and hopefully in that time you can get some younger guys up. But I think he'd be a good fit for them.
Yeah, I think if they miss out on Soto, then they'll pivot to one of the high end first basemen, and like they'll pivot to a bunch of different guys, and I think that would make a ton of sense. I'm going to send him to Seattle. Seattle's been desperate for a first baseman they can plug in every day since Ty France fell off. Prefer right-handed bat. Like I don't have a ton of extra reasoning. Stays out on the West Coast, but I just think it'd be a good fit in Seattle, and they're always desperate for hitting. And I know they're in this market, so whether it be a trade or a free agent. So I'll send him to Seattle.
That's a good one because his contract probably won't be too absurd that they wouldn't be willing to pay to. That's a good one.
Next one. So we did, Teoscar Hernandez. We'll go to Teoscar Hernandez here. I'll start. I'm going to send him back to the Dodgers. I thought that was just an amazing fit. Maybe they, don't want to give him a big contract. I know last year he kind of got to the end of the offseason, so they said, sure, why not? Let's bring in Teoscar. But I just thought it was so perfect for their lineup, giving them that right-handed thump with, the lefties of Freeman and, of course, Ohtani and Muncy. He just was such a perfect fit for me. So I'm going to say keep him in LA.
Yeah, I think it seems like he wants to stay in LA. So that is honestly a very good pick with that in mind. I think it's going to be the Boston Red Sox because I think they're going to swing a miss on the Soto. They tried to get Teoscar last offseason, and it didn't work out because obviously the Dodgers, enticed them more with that big 1-year contract, but with the opt-out. But I think the Red Sox are looking to spend, as we've talked about multiple times off air, and they need offense. And I think that given that I don't think they're going to get Soto, he's going to be one of the best options available for them to put him in their outfield or even eventually DH. And I think that I just think he's a good fit for the Sox. I think they really like him too. So I think they give him.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing fit. It's like why O'Neill was successful. It's like Teoscar's an even better version of that. The monster would be great for him. He would slug so many balls over that thing, and it's a more manageable left field for him defensively, albeit a very tricky one. So yeah, I think that's a good call. Next one we'll go for your boy Sean Manaea, coming off a breakout season, especially in the second half for the Mets. I guess I can start this one off as well. I'm going to send him back to the Mets. I think it was a great fit, obviously, from a money standpoint. He seemed to love it there. They loved him. He pitched unbelievable in the second half. I don't think there needs a ton of explanation on this one. I think you can get a really good deal there. They've had the whole year to talk, to him, especially once he opted out. So I just think it was a good fit and no reason to leave, especially when he can get, just as much money there, if not more than anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's the Mets. I think it's also like bang for your buck wise, and given we saw what he did all the way into the NLCS where he kind of got burnt out, but he's flipped that his pitch, the way he throws it, from the cross action after he saw the Sale pitching middle of the season, and I think that was a massive game changer. And I actually think he might get a little bit undervalued because people are gonna be like, oh, he's been hurt. But if he's able to continue that magic, like he's going to be an insane value. So I think Stearns is going to want him back, assuming he doesn't ask for something ridiculous. And he loves New York. Like he wanted to come back, so we love him. It's a perfect fit for him to come back.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess from one of your big free agents to one of ours, Anthony Santander, coming off a 40-plus homer season in Baltimore. I said earlier, I don't think he'll be back. Unfortunately, unbelievable in the clubhouse, beloved there. But I think the Orioles just need a slightly different profile for that spot and are targeting more starting pitching for their big ads. So I'll kick it to you first for where you think he lands.
Yeah, this one's really hard because I just think that I think there's so many teams that are going to want him given his ability. Okay. I don't think that they can be doing this, right? Like, I don't think this team should be doing this. But I believe that the Yankees are just going to try to spend a bunch of money to try to fill in holes in their roster, assuming they don't get who they ideally want. And it's going to be one of those panic, let me just try to fill in this lineup. So I think they're going to get a little bit crazy with it. And some part of me thinks they're going to go sign, assuming they don't get a certain somebody, they're going to go sign 2 big hitters and just be like, let's try to say we're the Yankees of we're the Yankees of old or whatever it is. And I think they're going to get Santander as well, and just try to create some massive power lineup because I think the issue is they know that's not the greatest approach, but they're going to feel like that's all they can do because there's not anything else out available for them to do, especially because their prospect pool isn't great. And I don't necessarily think they can trade for anyone hitting wise that's going to be impactful. So I actually have them going to the Yankees as well.
Yeah, I saw this one the other day. I just would not sit well with me at all. I don't know if I agree with the fit quite as much as people have been saying, just because I do think they need a slightly higher profile defender. Now, Santander's he actually is better than you might think he would be in defensively, but he's also probably league average at best. And I think, again, I don't want to talk about too much about Soto yet, but part of the reason I think the fit isn't perfect is because I really think they need to move Judge back to right field, both for his longevity, health-wise, but also because he was not good in center last year. And I think they need, someone for left field, which is really, really hard to play at Yankee Stadium for some reason. I don't know why. I guess it's just huge and really tricky, but guys struggle there all the time. So maybe I'll save this actually. I'll save it for when we talk about trades, but I have a fit for that one. So my Santander fit, I mentioned the Blue Jays. I think the Blue Jays are the ones that are going to go get him. He's tormented them in the division for years. They need a big time power bat, like you mentioned earlier. I think a switch hitter helps them because they do have a lot of righties already. So someone that's better from the left side would be good. Can get a lot of DH at bats, can also play right field. I think that's actually a really good fit. I would also not be too happy about it, especially with the Blue Jays building a nice little young core. But I think he would get along great with Vladdy, and I think it's a great fit there. So,
agreed.
Hope it doesn't happen.
It's almost like basically him inside Tyler O'Neill, as I predicted earlier. So both of us have them doing some sort of power batman outfield.
Yeah. So here's a fun one here. How about Jack Flaherty? Interesting season for Flaherty. He was amazing in Detroit. Gets traded at the deadline for Trey Sweeney, who turns into the Tigers' everyday shortstop going into the playoffs after they make a remarkable run into the playoffs. But they fall up short in the playoffs because they didn't have the top of the rotation starter. But they probably wouldn't have made the playoffs without Trey Sweeney. So really interesting situation. And then Jack has some really good moments for the Dodgers down the stretch. A little inconsistent there in the World Series as he flamed out. But LA guy, so I think he would want to go back to LA, but do you think it happens, or do you have another team in mind here for Jack?
No, and here's the thing. I wanted to give him to the Yankees, but I'm just they can't just sign everybody, but I feel like he'd be the kind of guy that they'd go after what they did with Rodon a year ago. And here's my thing. I like Flaherty. This isn't a knock against him, but I do feel like he's not someone I would personally want to sign for the money that he's going to go for, which is kind of why I hope the Yankees sign him. But I'm actually going to have him go to the Tigers. I think they need to make some sort of a move. They got like 2 years of Tariq left. Like, go make a move and try to go do something because you just had a little bit of buzz at the end of the year, and so I think he's going to the Tigers.
I thought I was being sneaky by sending him back to the Tigers, but I guess not. And I don't have another one in mind, so I was hoping to go no duplicates. But I don't know. I haven't heard anything on it, but I do know the Tigers are going to want another fairly big name starter, and it just worked out so well. He was like tweeting, making fun of Tarek, like after he won the Cy Young. Like it just feels like a really good situation there. So, I mean, that would be kind of a coup if the Tigers could trade him for an everyday shortstop for the next 6 years. And then get him back in free agency, kind of like the Aroldis Chapman, Gleyber Torres situation from years ago that the Yankees pulled off. So I don't actually really think it happens, but I don't know if I have a better recommendation. It almost would have been like the Angels, because I agree. I think like the smart teams kind of maybe aren't quite on him as well, which is why like the Dodgers, I don't think are that interested in bringing him back. So like I thought the Angels would have been a good fit, but maybe they still are even after they added Kikuchi. But yeah, I would love to see him go back to the Tigers. It was a perfect situation, and I think the Tigers need a righty at the top of the rotation with Tarek.
I agree with that.
All right, jumping back to one of the Mets' other big free agents, Pete Alonso. Similar to Santander, in this case first base, but 40+ homer power. Amazing run down the stretch, including that just ridiculous homer off the Brewers. I'm going to say, and again, these are all, I think, tied into Soto, but I'm going to say he stays with the Mets. I think he maybe saved his, his ability to do that there with the homer in Milwaukee and just his play down the stretch in general. I think this could happen, even if the Mets get Soto back or get Soto. I think they could also keep Alonso, but I'll keep him in Queens.
Yeah, I think he's going to stay in Queens, but mainly because I don't think he's going to get the kind of contract that Boris wants. And especially after this past year, he had a great postseason, but with the average numbers and he's not like a big walks guy. Like, and he's a first baseman who he's great at scooping the ball, but he's not like some incredible defensive first baseman. He's like maybe league average, and he's improved a lot. I'll give him credit there. I just think that the contract is going to be perfect for us to go be able to re-sign him. We'll give him a few million more a year than anyone else would probably give him because we love Pete and we don't want to see Pete anywhere else. And I think he fits right back in our lineup. I also kind of think we need him. Like, even if you get Soto, like we're going to be devoid of power. Right? Even with Vientos and Lindor, like we need that extra power bat. So I think it's a perfect fit. Yep.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think the Yankees could be in this market if they don't, like whoever loses out on Soto is definitely here. I do think Walker is a better fit for the Yankees than Alonso is. The defense was a good call out because like Anthony Rizzo changed their entire infield defense just with his glove at first. So I think they would prefer Walker for
Nationals too.
The Nationals are interesting for, Santander for the same reason. I think him and Alonso basically have the same profile, just different positions. League average defensively and basically homers. You're buying the homers and you get tons of them, but otherwise it's a low average and low on base and whatnot. But cool. We're doing a little too much agreeing here, so we need to mix it up here and let's hope Max Fried, getting to some of the big names here in the market. Where do you have Max Fried going?
This one's really tough. I think anytime when it's like a free agent pitcher who has this profile, lefty, who is incredible when he's healthy, it's really tough to predict. I want to say Dodgers, but here's the thing. I have Roki going to the Dodgers, so I don't know how you're going to end up having Roki and Max Fried and Yamamoto and eventually Ohtani, and then they got a couple guys coming back. But this is actually kind of a more popular pick that a lot of people are making, so I feel a little bit bad agreeing with the consensus, but I actually think he's going to go to the Cubs. If I had to guess, I think the Chicago Cubs are going to try to make some kind of a big free agent acquisition, and I think especially in the pitching front. The only problem, though, is they have a bunch of lefty pitchers, so it's probably not the best fit with kind of how their rotation shakes out. But at the same time, he's so good against lefties and righties, it might not matter. So I think Chicago is going to try to get somebody. And out of everyone on this list, he just felt like someone that might be that guy. I was debating between him and Burnes, but I think it would be him. So that's my thought.
Interesting. Yeah, so this is where I feel pretty good. I'm sure I'll get one of these wrong, but I feel pretty good that Burnes, Fried, Snell are Dodgers, Red Sox. Who am I missing? Orioles.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
just don't know where those three are going. But I feel very good at least two of them. I think there's a very good chance that those are the three landing spots for all three of them. And could be any combination, honestly. I'm sure I'll get one wrong just because, nothing's ever a sure thing. So, because Max Fried and Corbin Burnes are both from the LA area, if I'm not mistaken. So, other than maybe Fried going back to Atlanta, I think they would both have their first choice be LA. And I think LA wants to add two. I think they want to add one of the big name guys and potentially Sasaki, a trade for Garrett Crochet, something like that. And kind of have, because Sasaki will need to be on a 6-man. Otani obviously can't even, I think, pitch to start the year with the labrum now, not even Tommy John. So they have a lot of question marks. They got a lot of young guys there as well. But I am going to send Max Fried actually to the Dodgers, perhaps hopeful that it's not Burnes that goes to the Dodgers, not to spoil my later pick. But, I think the Dodgers might have a preference for Fried, as it seems like, maybe teams do over Burnes, and being from LA, I think it's a good fit. A lefty to mix in with all those other guys we mentioned, I think would be good. So yeah, I think, I hate to keep sending everyone to the Dodgers, but unfortunately that seems to be how it goes. They get what they want. So
That happens
yeah.
often. Yeah.
The Red Sox buzz is hot though too. So I think that's got a real, and Baltimore. I think, for whatever reason, I don't think the Orioles are getting free because he's not coming from a huge market, but it just, I don't know. I don't see it quite as much. I would love it though, but
I think the only reason I haven't put any of them on the Dodgers is purely because I just don't want them on the Dodgers. Maybe that's my subconscious bias played into it. Like, you can't have rookie and then go get them with everything. But they very well could, and honestly, likely will sign one of them. I just couldn't figure out if they would.
Yep.
You want to tee up the next one? I know we have Willie Adames next on the list. I'm actually curious to see what you think first this time with Willie Adames. He's been a tough one. I feel like there's one fit, so I'm curious to see what you think.
This is a tricky one. Again, I hate to keep sending guys to the same teams. I was actually hoping to go second and maybe change my mind, but I actually penciled in the Mets here first. I think you guys need to add to that third base spot as well. There's not many options out there. Bregman's out there as well, but I have him in a different destination. And again, it all relates to where Juan Soto goes as well. But I wanted to change my mind on this one, but I didn't really have a better one in mind, and put me on the spot. So I'll keep him with the Mets. I think with Alonso as well going back.
Yeah, the only reason I don't think that might happen is because I think Pete's going to re-sign with the Mets, and after that happens, I don't think we're willing to. Although, it might be the best move for defense. I don't think we're willing to immediately just turn Mark Vientos into a DH forever, because I think he's a building block for us, and the goal is we want to keep Vientos improving, and he improved a lot at third base. I don't think he's ever going to be a Gold Glove third baseman, to make it clear, but I do think he can be at least a league average one, and I think we'd be fine with that, at least in the short term. So that's my only reason that I struggle with Adames. I guess you could put him at second, maybe, but I don't know. We have some prospects. It would just create a little bit of chaos. That's why.
You're right. That doesn't make sense. If you send Alonso back there, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's kind of one or the other.
You can't have both, is what I'm thinking. I think if we don't get Alonso, then I very much think he could be, because then we'd move Vientos to first, I think. But with me thinking that we're going to get Alonso, the San Francisco Giants make way too much sense for. Actually, as a matter of fact, if they don't sign Willie Adames, I'm immediately going to roast Buster Posey. I just, like, if he goes and gets like some old head like Brandon Crawford to come back, I'm going to be like, bro, what are you doing? You guys have been trying to land a free agent for years. You haven't had much success getting any of like the position players. Adames is a great shortstop, and he has power. He would fit in perfectly for that team who is devoid of a shortstop. I think this is the only free agent where I can definitively say this is the right team for you, and be very confident about that. So I'm going to say the Giants.
Yeah, I think Red Sox is interesting because you hear the speculation that they're going to move Devers to first potentially, which then what do you do with Casas and Yoshida, who's more of a DH at this point? So it's an interesting fit, but there's also talk of maybe Casas being part of a Crochet package. So, him playing third in Boston would be interesting. I like the Giants. I have Ha-Seong Kim going to the Giants to pair with Jung-Ho Lee. To get some Korean magic there, as similar defense first premium position guys. But yeah, it almost makes sense there. I don't know where else. I mean, I know the Phillies are looking at third base. So there's But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Brewers basically said he's not coming back. Just because of their market, what he's going to cost. Joey Ortiz slides into their everyday shortstop role. So, that was an interesting interview with, I don't know if it was the GM or the manager, that they were like basically definitively said he's not coming back, which I thought was odd with how much they love him. But anyways, jump up to number 4 here. Blake Snell, one of the other big name pitchers. For me, he's arguably, if I need a guy to start a game tomorrow and win, there's not many guys I'm taking over Blake Snell. When he's right, he's just so unbelievably nasty. So I'll make you go first on this one.
Yeah, I think he also proved he can go deeper into games this year too. Especially in the second half, he started the season later when he got signed. I think you guys are signing someone this offseason to supplant your team. And if you don't, I don't know what your ownership and general manager is doing, because you're ready to win right now. Your offense is in a good spot. Even if you don't get someone in right field, your offense is in a good spot to go compete right here, right now. Blake Snell is the perfect fit for you guys, in my opinion, because I don't think he's going to cost as much, or at least in terms of his AAV might be as high as some of the other two guys that we've talked about, but I don't think the length is going to be as high as Burnes and Fried might be. And that's why I think Snell would be the perfect fit for you guys. I also think your pitching development, your analytics is great. And I think with the way you manage your team, he fits in perfectly for that. And I think you guys could go make noise and go potentially win a World Series with him as your number one. So I think that would be a great fit. And that's where I'm going to have him going, because I know you're signing somebody. In my mind, I think it's him.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a strong option. I think we're getting one of those 3 guys, like I said, or like maybe if you guys don't get Manaea back, or maybe there's a couple other guys that could fit that mold. But my preference is actually for a longer AAV. No, I'm not the one that's cutting the checks, but just because like our window at this point is 5 or 6 years of these prospects and we've been doing 1-year deals with all these guys, and then Burnes the trade was only a 1-year potentially situation, but I kind of want that consistency of, the same guy being in the locker room year over year, as opposed to keep rotating your leader of your rotation every year, which I think we're ready to do from an ownership standpoint and just from a team standpoint. So I want someone that lines up with that window, but which is why I prefer like Fried and Burnes on the longer term deals. But yeah, like I said, I'm not cutting the checks. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and definitely a strong possibility. So I don't have him as the Orioles pitcher from this group. I do have this being the guy that goes to Boston. So I think Boston's trying to spend big this winter, they said, and I think Fried's a strong possibility there. I don't see the Burnes one quite as much, but I think Snell would make a lot of sense there. Maybe going back to the Giants because it was a good fit, but yeah, I'm gonna send him to Boston.
That's a good one. I could agree with that one too.
Yep. Next, mentioned him earlier, Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman, interesting. Not seen quite on the same level as that Manny Machado contract from a few years ago, but maybe closer than you might think, especially with how that's turned out for the Padres. There's been tons of heat on this one. I feel pretty confident this is going to happen, that he is going to end up in Philadelphia. He seems like a good fit with their clubhouse for reasons I won't mention, but it seems to make a lot of sense. They're really trying to trade Alec Boehm. They don't like Alec Boehm at all, so I expect they'll find a suitor for him. They might not get much back, but I do expect a lot of changes in Philly after falling short again. And there's just so much heat on this. I think usually when the Phillies want someone like to this degree, like sure they want Soto, but that's not really realistic. But when they want someone this bad, that's also very realistic. They usually get him. So I think Alex Bregman to Philly is going to happen.
I'm kind of torn because initially I know I gave Santander and Christian Walker to the Yankees. I kind of felt like there could be a world like if if Santander doesn't go to the Yankees, they get Christian Walker, then Bregman might be someone that they would strongly consider, especially because Gleyber Torres is a free agent, right? If I remember correctly. Yep. So with that in mind, I think Bregman would actually be a great fit for them if that was to happen. But in a world where I do think those two sign, which is what I predicted, the Phillies is a great pick on your part. I could totally see that, and you're right. He seems like Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, like Kyle Schwarber. He seems like another like duplicate of them at third base. I totally agree with you. I think the Houston Astros might actually re-sign him. He just feels like he could be an Astro for life. And the reason I say that is I don't think they're going to be willing to pay Kyle Tucker the money that he is going to want next offseason when you have to compare between the two. And I don't think they can let both of those guys go with Yordan Alvarez still there and with a Altuve at the end of his career and stuff. I feel like they'll try to retain one of them, and I think out of the two, it'll be Bregman. So that's why I'm staying with the Astros.
Sure. Yeah, the Yankees situation, maybe I'll talk about the Yankees later after we talk about Soto, because Torres is gone, but then you have Chisholm, who more naturally a second baseman, but looks great at third base. So you can kind of sign either, right? Or if you want to re-sign Torres, you could do that, or Bregman's an option, Adames is an option. So
I'd be shocked if they re-sign Torres, man. It's just too up and down. Like I don't like, obviously he finished the season well, but like in a world, they'd be so upset with themselves if they re-sign him and then he does what he did at the beginning of the year or a year ago again. Like fans will go crazy. I just don't think it's happening.
It would be wild. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen as well. All right, top two, Corbin Burnes. Obviously just got traded to Baltimore, had a solid season, didn't finish in the top three of the Cy Young voting. Some of the chatter didn't strike out as many guys this year. That's been a trend over the last few years. My take on this is that he was doing that intentionally, just to have, especially in the huge Camden Yards, which is no longer going to be huge, which is a whole nother hilarious storyline of this offseason. But he was just pitching to contact more. The stuff is starting to tick down, but you would expect that at his age. But my take on Burnes is on this whole concept. I think he's not like the true kind of ace for the most part that people think of, in that pretty much the entire year he would give 2 runs over 6 innings or 7 innings or whatever, or 3 runs literally every single time out, which is unbelievable. And he's probably one of the most consistent pitchers in the game. So I don't want to knock him for that, but it was like sometimes you just need your guy to go out there and give you 7 shut and like dominate the game. Now, granted, in September and in his one playoff start, he did that. So it's a little, but for basically, it was basically like 6 months of 2 runs over 6. Again, amazing, great year, but was never going no runs over 6. And then it was like 1 month where he was horrendous. Was giving up like 5 or 6 runs an inning. And then September, and then the one start in October, he was, lights out. Basically, no one was scoring off of him. Made some tweaks with the cutter, which was good to see. So it's an interesting case here. He's obviously going to get a long-term deal. Long-term pitching deals tend to not work out in that regard. So, and he's already, 30 or so. So, a lot to make of this one, but I'll punt it to you here for your pick.
Yeah. This has been a really tough one for me because obviously coming into the offseason, I was like really hopeful the Mets would sign him. And I was thinking, okay, the Mets are probably going to get one of the big 3 free agent pitchers. And I think a lot of people still think that. I don't know. Some part of me is giving me this gut feeling that given the way that David Stearns operates and how he likes to build out his pitching units, some part of me just thinks we're not going to sign any of them. Like I think we're going to explore other avenues, whether it's a trade market, development with what we have. And I think we're going to need another top of the line guy, but I think we're going to try to find that a different way. So I actually don't think he's going to the Mets. I think just because I think his contract, his contract is like not as high as people expect it to be, then I think we have a really good shot. But I don't think Stearns is going to be the guy to just throw money at starting pitchers over a long AAV. So my actual option, I really, really strongly considered picking the Nationals because I just think that they're in that mode where they really want to just like make a couple moves, but I think he's just a little bit too old for them and might have the regression aspect for them to throw like that, like really long contract to him. So because I put Blake Snell on your Orioles, I agree with you that the Red Sox are going to get another top of the line guy. I think it's going to be Corbin Burnes. I think he kind of feels like he could fit in really well with the Red Sox, especially with like, they already have some guys that have been there for a little while. I think he'd fit in really well with that clubhouse and be a good, like, kind of leader from the pitching staff perspective with some of the younger guys they have. And I think he kind of just like perfectly blends in with them. So I think they're going to give him that big contract. And I think they're going to know the back half of it is probably not going to look amazing, but he's a gamer. So I think even at the end of his career, he'll be one of those guys that like can still give you like a 3.5 ERA while just pitching to contact and getting outs as he's starting to do. So I think it's going to be the Sox.
Yeah. So I think for Burnes, I think his first choice is the Dodgers. Again, I mentioned earlier, he's from the LA area. Like he just had twins. He's got like 3 kids now. He just wants, he wants to win. He wants to like secure his bag that he's deserved over the course of his career. And he wants somewhere that he's going to be happy. And like the Dodgers is such an unbelievably perfect fit for this guy from his perspective. But so that's the obvious spot, but I'm not convinced that they really want him as much as he wants them because of some of the things we mentioned. I think they'd prefer Fried, which is why I sent Fried there. And I think it's Dodgers or the Orioles, man. And because of that, I'm playing with my heart this year. But I think Corbin Burnes, much to the shock of the baseball world that said when we traded him, there's no chance we re-sign him, all that nonsense. I think he's coming back. I think the Orioles are going to give him a contract similar to what teams are offering with the new ownership. He seemed to love the clubhouse. Obviously, we loved him. That goes without saying. And I think a team like the Orioles can live with some of the things we mentioned earlier, especially when, in my opinion, one of my bold baseball predictions for not next year, but the year after is Kyle Bradish wins the 2026 Cy Young. So if Corbin Burnes is a number 2 starter, I'm fine with that because I think we have our number 1 starter already in house, not to mention Grayson Rodriguez. So I think just a guy that consistently goes out and gives you that almost 200 durable innings of just solid pitching and leadership. I think of all the teams, that makes the most sense for the Orioles, even if that, they have to live with some of the things on the back half and whatnot, which would be a little out of character. So I'll go with my heart a little bit on this one. I think maybe Snell does make a little bit more sense. But I'm going to send Corbin Burnes back to the Orioles. And the other thing about the big market, I don't think he's necessarily someone that is like some guys I just don't see going outside of one of the major markets. But he was in Milwaukee. He's been in Baltimore. I don't think he cares about that at all. I think he just wants somewhere he's going to be happy. And he was happy for a year in Baltimore. And if he can't go to the Dodgers, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to go back.
That's a very fair point. That is.
And then the big one. Big one is Mr. Juan Soto. Obviously, a career year for the Yankees, 3rd in MVP voting. Yankees were trying to re-sign him, but Steve Cohen is backing up the truck of money to try to bring this guy in. I'll start. Again, I don't want to be. I'm trying not to be duplicative here, so I'm going to maybe go against what seems to be the trend here, and I'm going to say that a lot of the Mets noise out there right now, and a lot of the experts kind of leaning that direction, is maybe a bit of a smokescreen, and that the Yankees they get desperate enough to keep up with Cohen, and they re-sign Juan Soto after he brought them to the World Series this year. Out of seemingly nowhere after not even making the playoffs the year before. So I'm going to say the Yankees find a way to re-sign this guy just out of almost desperation, even though I don't think it's a perfect fit defensively like I meant earlier, even though the Mets are going to do absolutely everything in their power, and I think it maybe makes more sense on a lot of different levels for him to be there. I just think the Yankees are going to get it done. And he obviously loved playing there. It was just a year, though, so I don't think he's not going to give a discount or anything like that, but I'm going to say they find a way to get done.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that take at all. I'm actually kind of like getting a little bit, I wouldn't say irritated, like people have to do their jobs and they have to report, but like Bob Nightingale today, for example, said the Mets are a clear-cut favorite. He came out with an article this morning for Soto. And I'm just like, I get that people are saying that because we're going to offer the most money, and I would be absolutely shocked if we didn't. But to assume that we can just read into Soto's mind and be like, oh yeah, we're the clear-cut favorites in a world where he's the most enticing free agent that we have seen maybe ever. I mean, obviously Ohtani's was in that conversation because he does both things, but Soto's 26. So you're getting a guy who's basically already had a Hall of Fame career and he's in his mid-20s. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. The reason I'm picking my Mets, though, is I truly just don't believe that anyone is going to give him the amount of money that we are going to give him. And I really don't even think it's going to be close if we need it to be more. You know what I mean? I think even there might even be a world where David Stern's like, hey Steve, this is getting a little too much. Maybe we should allocate this money somewhere else. I could see David Stern saying that because he knows how to build winners without having to make these kinds of contracts. But I believe the moment Steve Cohen signed, or the moment Steve Cohen bought the Mets, this is the guy he was looking at. This is what people have been saying since the moment he took over as an owner. He wanted Juan Soto from the get-go. It's why with Aaron Judge, he told the Yankees he's not going to step on their toes. It's why with Shohei, he was like, we're not ready to compete, and we weren't going to get him anyway, but he didn't even try to go make him an offer. Juan Soto was that guy, and I think he is going to do everything. People were saying ridiculous things like he might offer $50 million more than everyone else. He might actually offer $50 million more than everyone else, just because I think he's one of those guys that spends $400 million on a piece of artwork. Like, he's not letting Juan Soto go if he can do anything about it. The only way I see him not going to the Mets is if he goes to the Yankees, and the only way I would see that is if he truly just enjoyed the pinstripes that much. But I don't believe that 1 year, even with the success they had and them going to the World Series, is enough for Juan Soto to be like, hey, I need to rep the pinstripes forever. I could definitely see him coming over to the Mets and having a good time. And the other number one thing I'll say, or the other major factor I'll say, is Francisco Lindor and Carlos Mendoza, along with a lot of the other amazing Latin clubhouse guys we have, would be so much fun for him, man. He could go from like the team that says you can't have a beard or long hair to going to the team that wants to party and celebrate every time we get a big win. And I could see him really enjoying that atmosphere as a 25-year-old young man who is taking over the world. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, the thing I'll add about the Yankees, I feel like it's less the 1 year he had there and more just the brand. Like the Yankee brand is like, it's, maybe one of the strongest in all of sports globally. So I think that element makes a big difference as opposed to just the fact that he was there for a year. But
I will also say though, the brand will exist forever, and I'm not taking that away from him. I'm never going to pretend like any other team, except for maybe the Dodgers, who have kind of inched their way into the international scope, will ever compete with that brand. But I do think it doesn't nearly have the allure it did like 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think players are like leaving money on the table anymore to go to the Yankees, with the exception of Judge, who has been a lifelong Yankee, anymore, because they haven't proven that what the Yankees were 20 years ago, the consistent championship winners that they are who the Yankees are now. And that's why I just believe that, like, when people say, oh, it's the Yankees, they're going to go get him, people live a little bit too much in the past. Yeah, I do agree that some guys will have always wanted to be a Yankee and they'll go that way. But I think baseball can always change, and the Yankees will always be an institution. But some teams just have money, and some teams are ready to build winners. And that's why I think we're going to win this one. Hopefully, I mean, if we don't, it won't be because we didn't offer too much, and I can live with that. I can't, I won't pivot, but I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, and the 50 million thing, like, I'm like, it's a lot of money, but like you said, it's really in the scope of these contracts, it's not that much money at all. And
nothing.
Yeah, especially to Cohen. Yeah, and, the Latin American nature of your clubhouse, like, I think in that sense it makes a better fit. And I mean, it's good. We're almost at an hour here. But it's an interesting question of how these teams pivot. Like, I actually think it makes more sense, whereas the Mets kind of need, I mean, they have Lindor obviously, but like getting another star in there, I think is more of a need for the Mets, and maybe not even more of a need, but more of an appropriate fit. Whereas the Yankees need 3 everyday starters to fill their lineup. Otherwise they're absolutely screwed. Right. So I think it makes a lot more sense for them to go Walker first base. My honorable mention I'll do quickly on the trade market is Cody Bellinger to the Yankees has always felt like it needs to happen. So, and he'd be great defensively in left field. So you can trade for Bellinger, put him in left, and then at third you could, Bregman, Adames, or re-sign Torres. But you basically need to fill those 3 spots in addition to plugging not Spencer Jones, Jason Dominguez into center field every day. So I just hate the Soto defensively, Judge in center mess they have. I mean, Soto's a disaster in the outfield. Like, whoever signs him is just going to have to live with it, because you can't DH a 26-year-old. But it just was, not a good fit there from that perspective for the Yankees. Granted, they made the World Series, so it's hard to nitpick too much. But yeah. All right. Anything else on Soto, or any honorable mentions you got, Si, before we wrap up this?
No honorable mentions. Honestly, I had so much fun with this segment. So I'm really looking forward to talking more baseball. And I think we're going to start seeing a couple more signings, but that's the thing with baseball, man. Like, one of these